I swear, if the audio doesn't work today, I'm gonna scream. Not that you'd be able to hear it. Welcome to the Time Treadmill. I'm Ron, and these are my sweaty thoughts about Doctor Who. The last several days on this ridiculous project have seemed like a never-ending trail of disasters. So I finished The Power of the Daleks. I was really looking forward the next morning to waking up and starting in on the Highlanders. Now, bear in mind that the Highlanders is one of the completely lost stories. None of the episodes exist in the BBC archives. So, as with the first time through this project, my intention was to watch the loose cannon reconstruction of this story. So you can imagine my disappointment when I went to the loose cannon collection of playlists and discovered that the Highlander was completely missing all of the episode reconstructions. I don't know what happened, I suspect it's a copyright thing. But in any case, I laid there, looked at that, considered just moving on to the next story, Underwater Menace, and then just shrugged and rolled over and went back to sleep. Now later that night, I was able to find another reconstruction of Highlanders that uses the audio that was officially released by the BBC several years ago, with narration, paired with still images from the various telesnaps and such. It's not as good as the loose cannon, but by God, at least it's there. And so the following morning, I got up and watched the first two episodes of Highlanders, and I was so excited to see it. And I spoke at length about the details of the story and how it was lost and why it's so historically significant and all of those things. And then that night, I went to edit together the video and discovered I had completely failed to put on my microphone and none of the audio was usable. So the microphone was turned off. It was just coiled up and inside a cabinet off to the side of the room, and all of the audio was completely unusable. It was quiet and echoey, and it was just a complete disaster. So not only was that entire day a waste, the day before had been a waste, and the next morning when I woke up, that was the day that daylight savings kicked in, so I'd lost an hour overnight, and I just could not bring myself to get on the treadmill. So finally, here I am today talking about the Highlanders, and hopefully my microphone's working. If it's not, I don't even know. Well, if it's not, you won't have gotten this far, so there you go. So why is the Highlanders so important? Well, it's important for two key reasons. Number one, the Highlanders is the last pure historical, with one minor exception. In the Fifth Doctor era, there is Black Orchid, which is a fantastic story and definitely a pure historical. But starting in 1967, from then forward, with that one brief exception in 1981, there has never been another pure historical story in Doctor Who. Every single story since then has had some sort of science fictional element as a key plot point. Every single one. And that just wounds me. The pure historicals are a fantastic tool. And it's not just that it's educational. I understand the show in 2020, probably not trying to be a children's educational program. I get that. But that does not change the fact that the historical settings can be absolutely ripe for drama and... Anyway, I can go off on that rant for hours. The point being that the Highlanders, for me, is so exciting to watch because it truly marks the end of an era. From this point forward, pure historicals just functionally don't exist. And yet, even though it's the end of an era, by definition, that means it's the dawn of a new era. And in this case, and my second reason for why this story is so important, this is the story that brings Jamie McCrimmon on as a companion. Jamie McCrimmon is hands down the second best companion in all of Doctor Who history, second only to Sarah Jane Smith. The pairing of Jamie McCrimmon with the second Doctor is just magical. And the two of them, Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines, have repeatedly said they would have happily gone on forever continuing to film new stories. And in fact, if it wasn't for the dawn of the color television era and the BBC deciding they needed to completely reformat the show, I genuinely believe those two together would have gone on to make the record for a longest running Doctor and companion. But even though that didn't happen, up until very, very recently, Fraser Hines had the distinction of being the companion to appear in more episodes than any other companion in Doctor Who history. Remembering that back in the 60s, they were shooting 40+ episodes per season, as compared to the 10 or 12 that they do now. And so, for decades, Fraser Hines held that crown until Jenna Coleman came along as Clara and finally beat Jamie's record for most episodes. And I'll get into the whole Clara discussion next year sometime. But in any case, here in the Highlanders, that's where that magical alchemy begins. And it's in this story that we truly begin to see Patrick Troughton grow into the role of Doctor and show exactly what kind of Doctor he's going to be. I sincerely do hope that this story gets chosen for animated reconstruction in the very near future, because it's just a real treasure and it's such a monumental moment in Doctor Who history. And really my only regret in this particular viewing of it is because I had to watch this other reconstruction. It was a narrated version, which is just a completely different feel to have someone talking through the action. The audio was designed for a CD release in which you would simply listen to the story with none of the imagery whatsoever. And in that sense, the loose cannon reconstructions are so much better because they're presented as closely as possible as the broadcast episode itself, with perhaps little bits of text to explain any silent sections or any movement that needs to be explained. Having a narrator totally changes the feel of the story, and while I'm certainly delighted that I managed to at least find some way to watch this story again, I just really want to see this one reconstructed and made available to the masses. It's such an important story. In any case, that wraps it up for the Highlanders. Tomorrow I move on to the Underwater Menace. I'll see you then.